All right, so here's the deal. We all on this earth are going to deal with temptation. 1 Corinthians 10:13 says this, "No temptation has overtaken you that is not common to man. God is faithful, and he will not let you be tempted beyond your ability. But with the temptation, he will also provide the way of escape, that you may be able to endure it." Have you ever thought about how you escape temptation when it comes your way? Here's the bottom line. As a believer, Christ has called us to holiness. He has called us to a righteous lifestyle. He says that he has come to give life and life more abundantly. That life that he is calling us to is a life where we are pursuing his desires and his wants and his commands. That's what holiness is about. But here's the problem. Temptation comes in, the enemy, Satan, like Jesus in the desert, comes in and tries to rob us of that life that Christ has called us to. Christ says, be holy, be righteous. This is how you do that. Temptation comes in and uses our fleshly desires to pull us away from what Christ really wants for us. So this is what we're going to deal with. How do we get out of that temptation when it comes? Scripture says that there's a way out. His name is Jesus Christ. This is what we're dealing with. Let's say that Christ has called us to something. He says, you know what? I don't want you to lie. I don't want you to have sex before you're married. I don't want you to deal with pornography. That's what we're going to say this is. This is the righteous way of living. This is what you are trying to stay completely away from. So what we do as Christians is we come and say, what is going to keep me from doing that? Those are called boundaries. So we say, I'm not going to have sex before I'm married. And so now we come in and we say, you know what? I'm only going to date the people who have that same kind of belief as I do. I'm going to date people who don't want to have sex before they're married. So that's a boundary that we set up. And maybe we set up another boundary like, to keep me from having sex before I'm married, I'm not going to be with an opposite sex in a situation where I could fall into that temptation. So remember, over there is what we're trying to stay away from. That's the opposite of the life that Christ wants us to live. And here are the boundaries that keep us from doing that. Now, this is what temptation does. Temptation comes and questions us. It puts doubt in our mind, and it says this right here. Is this really that necessary? Is that boundary really something that is necessary to keep you from doing that? And it comes along and it just kind of knocks it over and says, you don't really need that. Don't worry about it. We're left with a choice at that point in time, and the choice is this right here. Do we reestablish that boundary and say, no, that's important for me. I'm going to make sure I keep that boundary. Or do we just say, maybe it's really not that big deal? Here's the next problem. Temptation now has this running start as it's faced with this next boundary, and it comes in and it just kind of comes along and kicks that one out of the way and says, you don't really need that one either. And what temptation wants to do is it wants you to remove all of your boundaries so that all you have is that choice that you're trying to make. And when you don't have your boundaries to keep you from temptation, there's not a whole lot that's keeping you from falling in to what God doesn't want you to do. So why is this important for us to discuss? Why am I wanting to talk to you as parents about boundaries with your teenagers? Just like you struggle with temptations, so do your students. And here's what they need help with. Boundaries. How can you help your student deal and make boundaries in their life so that they keep from sin? Here's a few things that I would tell you to do. Sit down with your student. Ask them what they're struggling with. Ask them what the biggest temptation is in their life. And then ask them a question like, what boundaries are you setting up to keep you from falling into that temptation? If they struggle with coming up with boundaries, maybe you can help them establish some of those boundaries so that they can live the life that Christ wants them to live, holy and righteous, free from temptation and sin.